I still remember the night my life turned upside down. I had just turned 18, but instead of a birthday cake or a hug, I got handed a trash bag full of my clothes. My mom, Lorraine, shoved it into my arms like she was throwing out the garbage. My dad, Dennis, stood in the doorway, blocking any chance of me stepping back inside. His voice was cold, almost rehearsed, when he said, "You're grown now. Time to figure it out on your own." I stood there on the porch, my heart pounding so loud I swear the neighbors could have heard it. I kept waiting for one of them to crack, to laugh, to say it was some twisted joke, but the only sound was the door slamming shut in my face. Just like that, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just nobody. The air outside was freezing, but it wasn't the wind making me shiver, it was the shock. I stared down at the trash bag in my hands, the clothes sticking out of it, and I remember whispering, "Please, Mom, just let me stay tonight. I'll leave in the morning." Through the door, I heard her voice, sharp and final. "No, Avery, we're done, done." That word burned into me. I didn't have a car. I didn't have money. I didn't even have a plan. I only had a backpack and a half-dead phone. I sat on the curb until the porch light clicked off. The house I grew up in, the only place I'd ever felt safe, suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers, and maybe it always did. I don't know. What I do know is that night taught me how fast people can close a door on you when they decide you're not worth the trouble. It was the longest walk of my life, dragging that bag through the dark streets of Cedar Harbor. Every step felt heavier than the last. I remember looking back one last time, hoping, just hoping, I'd see the curtain move, or hear my mom call out my name. But nothing. Not a sound. That memory has lived with me for 10 years, and even now, when I drive back into that same town, the image is still sharp. The porch light, the cold air, the sting of that slammed door. But here's the thing. Back then, I felt powerless, broken, like I'd never matter again. Now I'm not that girl anymore. I didn't just survive. I built a life from scratch. A life strong enough to circle back here, face everything they threw at me, and take back the one thing they never thought I'd have the power to touch. Because after all these years, I'm not just coming back to Cedar Harbor, I'm coming back with the keys. And this time, it's not to beg them to let me in, it's to show them that the girl they threw away came back stronger than they ever imagined. Growing up in my house always felt like I was playing a role I didn't audition for. My older sister Brooke was the star of the family, the golden child who could do no wrong. Every little thing she did was praised. Her report cards, her outfits, even the way she smiled at the neighbors. Meanwhile, I always felt like I was standing in her shadow, invisible unless I messed up. And when I did, my parents made sure I knew it. I remember once in high school, I worked my butt off to win second place in a state art competition. I came home beaming, holding my certificate like it was a ticket to finally get noticed. My mom barely glanced at it before asking if Brooke needed a ride to her dance recital. My dad muttered something like, "That's nice, Avery," without even looking up from the TV. But when Brooke got a participation ribbon for her cheer squad, they threw a dinner party. That was my life. The real cutoff came later, when I was 18. My dad asked me to sign a loan in my name. He said it was just paperwork, that it would help the family. But I wasn't stupid. I'd seen the bills piling up, the late notices shoved in drawers. I told him no, and for a second I thought maybe he'd respect me for standing my ground. Instead, he turned red and shouted, "You're just as selfish as I thought." My mom stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding like he was right. That night, they packed my things. Not because I was reckless or cruel, but because I refused to let them bury me in their debt. It still stings when I think about how fast they threw me away. All my life, I thought maybe if I worked harder, maybe if I was better, they'd love me like they loved Brooke. But the truth was, they never wanted me to shine. Starting over wasn't glamorous. I didn't have college money, because that was gone, spent on Brooke's boutique and her big, showy wedding. I ended up on my friend Haley's couch, working 2 jobs just to afford ramen noodles and bus fare. During the day, I waited tables at a diner, and at night I filed receipts in the back office of a tiny landscaping company. I was exhausted, but I didn't quit. Somewhere deep down, I knew quitting would mean they were right about me. That landscaping company turned out to be my lifeline. The owner, Mr. Carson, noticed how fast I picked up the bookkeeping. He'd leave stacks of invoices for me, and I started teaching myself spreadsheets, budgets, even how to track property expenses. One day he said, "You're sharp, kid. Don't waste." That was the first time in my life an adult looked at me like I had potential. From there, I built slowly, saving pennies, studying every free resource I could find, and learning how the world of property and foreclosures really worked. While my parents were busy spoiling Brooke and drowning in debt, I was quietly building something they couldn't take from me, something they'd never see coming. If you want to know the moment everything truly turned, it wasn't the night they kicked me out. It was years later, when I found out what they did with the little bit of security I was supposed to have. See, my grandparents had left money for me and Brooke, college funds tucked away since we were kids. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. By the time I graduated high school, mine was gone. Every cent of it, spent on Brooke's boutique, her dream wedding, the champagne, the flowers, the dress, all of it. When I asked about it once, my mom just waved her hand and said, "You weren't going to college anyway, Avery. Brooke needed it more." Like it was nothing, like my future didn't matter. I still hear her voice when I think about it. Dismissive, cold, as if I was supposed to be grateful they even explained it at all. The irony is, all that money didn't even help. Brooke's boutique failed within a year. Too much debt, too much shopping for appearances, not enough business sense. My dad, desperate to cover her mistakes, refinanced the house. He pulled cash out of the place I used to call home just to keep her head above water. And when that didn't work, he did it again. Each time, the walls closed in tighter around them, but they still treated her like she was the pride of the family. Meanwhile, I was miles away, watching from a distance. I didn't have to dig too hard. The foreclosure notices were public record. I'd check the county clerk's site sometimes, just to see if the house I grew up in was still standing. When I saw the liens pile up, I can't lie, I felt a bitter satisfaction. The very same house they threw me out of was slipping through their fingers. But the breaking point came when I saw the auction notice. 212 Bayberry Drive. The porch where I once begged to stay was about to be stripped from them by the bank. I stared at that listing for hours. 10 years of swallowing pain, of pushing through every single slight, every cruel word came rushing back in that moment. And for once, I didn't feel powerless. I remembered the night my dad yelled, "You're on your own." And I thought, yeah, now you are too. I remembered my mom saying, "We're done." And I realized, this time, I got to say it back. They gambled everything on Brooke, on appearances, on a lifestyle they couldn't afford. They cut me out, but they couldn't cut out the consequences of their choice. That house was drowning under debt. And when it went up for auction, it wasn't just a property, it was my chance. My chance to stand where they once slammed the door in my face and finally close it on my own terms. When I found out the house was officially headed to auction, I didn't rush. I didn't scream or celebrate. I just sat there staring at the notice, letting it sink in. 10 years earlier, I'd been pushed off that porch with nothing but a trash bag. Now, the bank was dragging my parents off the same porch with foreclosure papers. It felt like the universe was handing me an invitation. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of Cedar Harbor. Nothing fancy, just a place to sleep and plan. I didn't want to be recognized. Not yet. People in this town loved gossip, and I needed silence to think. Every night I sat at that wobbly desk with my laptop open, double-checking the auction rules, the liens, the back taxes. I wasn't just buying a house, I was buying the symbol of everything they'd taken from me, and I wasn't about to screw it up. I set everything up under my company name, Slate and Finch. It was a shield, a way to keep my name off the records until I was ready to reveal it. The thought of my parents flipping through the paperwork and seeing my signature, that was what kept me going. The day of the auction, I dressed simply. Black blazer, jeans, nothing flashy. I walked into the courthouse with a calm face, but inside my chest was pounding. I scanned the room. A handful of investors I recognized, some small-town flippers, a couple of curious neighbors. No sign of my parents. They probably didn't even know how auctions worked. The auctioneer's voice was sharp, echoing through the chamber as he read off the list of properties. When he finally called out Bayberry Drive, my stomach tightened. My hands were steady though. I raised my card, clear and confident. The bids started low, then climbed. A man in a navy suit tried to push it higher, but I didn't flinch. Every time he nodded, I lifted my card. Calm, deliberate, unshaken. It came down to just the two of us. Him, probably thinking it was just another deal. Me, knowing this was the moment I'd been waiting for my whole life. When he finally dropped his hand, the auctioneer slammed the gavel and shouted, "Sold." I signed the papers right there, my name hidden behind the company, but I knew the truth. The house was the same house where I once begged for mercy, where I was told I wasn't worth keeping. It belonged to me now. As I walked out of that courthouse, the cool air hit me like a blessing. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger. This wasn't about money or even the house itself. This was about standing back at the place they threw me away from, and finally holding the power. And I wasn't done yet. I told the realtor I wanted the first walkthrough scheduled with the sellers still inside. I wanted them there when they learned the new owner was me. I wanted to look them in the eye and let them see exactly who had come back. The day of the walkthrough, my stomach felt like it was tied in knots, but on the outside I kept my face calm. I drove up to 212 Bayberry Drive like it was just another business appointment. But the moment I pulled into the driveway, the memories came flooding back. The porch light, the chipped white shutters, the place I once begged to stay. The realtor, Paige, was already there, standing by her car with a folder tucked under her arm. "Morning," she said with a polite smile. "The sellers will be here in a few minutes. Are you ready?" "More than ready," I told her, even though my heart was beating so hard it echoed in my ears. A few minutes later, I saw their car pull up. My parents stepped out, with Brooke trailing behind them. They looked smaller than I remembered, weighed down by stress and debt. Lorraine's hair was grayer, Dennis's posture wasn't as sharp, and Brooke, well, she looked nervous, like she knew this day wasn't going to go her way. They walked up to the porch, whispering to each other, probably rehearsing some speech. I heard Brooke murmur, "Maybe they'll give us an extension. Just beg if you have to, Mom." I almost laughed. For the first time, they were the ones about to beg. Inside, Paige opened the folder and began reading off the formalities. "The property has been transferred to the new owner, Slate and Finch LLC. Today's walkthrough will allow the sellers to confirm the terms before moving forward." My mom frowned. "Slate and what? Who even is that? Some investor?" That was when Paige glanced at me. "Actually, it might be easier if the new owner explains." I stepped forward. My parents turned to me, confused at first, and then recognition hit. Lorraine's mouth fell open. Dennis's face went pale. Brooke's eyes darted between us like she was watching a slow-motion car crash. "It's me," I said quietly. "I own the house now." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. My dad finally broke it with a bark. "This is a joke. You? You don't have that kind of money." "I do," I said calmly. "I bought it fair and square. The paperwork's right there." My mom's voice cracked as she whispered, "Avery, how could you do this to us?" I met her eyes and said, "Funny, that's the same question I asked when you threw me out with nothing. Remember? You told me you were done with me. I'm just giving you the same courtesy." Brooke stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This is cruel, Avery. They're your parents." I shook my head. "No, they were parents to you. To me, they were just landlords who kicked out a tenant they didn't want anymore." The room went silent again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there steady, holding the power they once used against me. For the first time, I wasn't the one on the outside of the door, I was the one holding the keys. After the walkthrough, I asked Paige to give me a few minutes alone in the house. She nodded and stepped outside, leaving me standing in the place I once called home. The walls felt smaller, the rooms emptier, almost like the house itself was tired of holding all the memories trapped inside. I walked slowly, running my fingers along the wallpaper in the hallway, remembering the nights I stayed up late, studying, the mornings I used to hear my mom humming in the kitchen. It all felt so far away, like it belonged to someone else's life. When I pushed open the door to my old room, I froze. The pink paint on the walls was faded now, peeling in the corners, but I could still see where my posters once hung. In the closet, shoved in the back, was a dusty shoebox. My hands trembled a little as I pulled it out. Inside were old school photos, my fifth-grade smile with crooked teeth, my high school picture where I tried too hard with eyeliner, and even the certificate from that art competition no one cared about. I stared at those pictures, wondering why they even kept them if they never meant anything. I picked up one photo, my junior year picture, and slipped it into my pocket. That was enough. Proof that I existed here, proof that I mattered, even when no one said it out loud. The rest I left behind. As I walked back into the kitchen, my parents were still arguing in low voices with Brooke. I could hear bits and pieces, not fair, heartless, how could she? But I didn't let it sink in. Their words didn't hold power over me anymore. I placed a copy of the move-out plan on the counter, the same way they once left me with nothing but a trash bag. This time, I wasn't cruel. I gave them 30 days, the standard. No mercy, but no revenge beyond that either. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway one last time, looking at the living room where I'd spent countless nights feeling invisible. It was strange. I thought I'd feel anger, or maybe satisfaction. Instead, I just felt done, like closing a book after the last page. Outside, the sun was bright, the air cool. Mrs. Whitaker, the neighbor, was tending to her garden across the street. She looked up, recognized me, and gave a small nod. Not judgmental, not surprised, just a quiet acknowledgement. I nodded back, slipping my hands into my pockets and walking toward my car. I didn't turn around when I heard the muffled voices still bickering inside. I didn't need to. That part of my life was over. As I slid behind the wheel, I looked at the photo resting on the seat beside me. My younger self, frozen in time, staring back with eyes that had no idea what was coming. I started the engine, took a deep breath, and pulled away from 212 Bayberry Drive. No reconciliation, no dramatic goodbye, just closure. For the first time in 10 years, I felt free and proud. Proud of the woman I'd become, and proud that I walked away on my own terms. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps me bring more stories of revenge, drama, and life lessons your way. I'd also love to hear your own experiences, so drop your story in the comments and let's build this space together. Remember, the best revenge is living stronger. See you in the next one.